Welcome into another episode of the Young Terps podcast. Ahmed Gafir and Mason Viner along with you, talking about the Terps win over Virginia from Friday night. Ahmed, let's kick it off with some game takes. What did you like? What did you see from Maryland?
Yeah, obviously, you got after the Charlotte game, the emphasis was start fast and finish fast. Maryland did not start fast, but they did finish fast. Obviously, week after scoring, I believe it was 38 unanswered points. Maryland did the same again on Friday night, scoring 42 unanswered. We're really able to kind of figure out defensively what Virginia was doing. Kind of caught a little bit by surprise with Anthony Calandria drawing the start over Tony Muskett. Which was, kind of the message kind of going into the week. Muskett, if he was healthy, he would draw the start. But overall, good day from Talia. I thought the defense kind of had its moments, had its good and bad moments. Obviously, 4 takeaways in the fourth quarter that helped seal it. But Bo Braid was an expected for subscribers on Inside Black and Gold, but nonetheless a notable absence in Friday's win.
Yeah, the Terps definitely start slow again. My take on it is if you go on the road, and we'll talk about that more on Tuesday and a little bit at the end of the show today. When you go on the road and you get down 14-0, it is a completely different game than being in front of a home crowd, 37,000 and change. Watch it from CQ Stadium live. It's a completely different thing. You're going to be facing crowd noise. You're going to be facing, teams that are hyped up to play in front of their fans. That absolutely has got to go. I really want to give a huge shout out to Maryland's special teams. Obviously, Braden Wazlowski with the kickoff return for a touchdown. Also good in the punting game. 3 punts inside the 20 land for the Terps in that aspect of the game. And look, Locks does it. He plays starters on special teams. He's got his best guys out there on the field in those moments. He talked about it post game, how pivotal special teams can really be and how that can swing the game for you one way or another. That is a unit that I think is much improved year over year during Loxley's tenure. And you're really seeing, I think, the gelling of the program come together at parts, but ultimately everybody wants to talk about the slow start, but Maryland really puts together a complete 3 quarters. We need to get a 4th quarter going if they really want to achieve their goals this year, but you're starting to see the pieces of the team gel together.
Yeah, I think the slow start. I think it's just the first drive, obviously, 3 and out. Loxley talked about they usually want to defer on kickoffs, or with they win the opening toss, they want to defer so that if they're able to get that last possession in the first half, you get that score, and then you get the ball to start the second half. So it could potentially be 2-score swing there. So obviously Maryland was able to kind of start with the ball, and like you said, chance to start fast, but quick 3 and out. That second drive, though, they were able to drive in and kind of approaching field goal territory a little bit on 1st and 10, and then they had a holding call that set them back. Really weren't able to pick up those yards back. So I think it felt a little bit different than Charlotte, for example, because I think Charlotte was really. I think that the concern about that was that it was a slow start, but it was also a poor read by Talia that went right into the hands of Charlotte on the first play of the game. So I think that kind of maybe accentuated that concern a little bit. But again, like you said, 14-0, can do that in Big Ten play, especially, if Maryland's going at Michigan State next week, if you find yourself down 14-0, Maryland doesn't have the benefit of, the crowd, the atmosphere to kind of do that. Obviously, I think, like you said, being able to put 3 quarters together, doing so, that comes with being able to make the adjustments. And I think you kind of were able to see that defensively from Maryland, obviously being able to shut Virginia out the rest of the way.
Yeah, I have to agree with you and a little bit walk back my comments, maybe a little bit there. The 14,
No, I get you.
the 14-0, it really is the score of the game, affects it. Almost I would go back to Charlotte and last week. Same thing, blown assignment on defense, gives the other team a big play, and then sort of, you just don't really pick it up. Virginia, obviously a huge passing play to start the game, which really didn't even let them. They're still running their scripted plays the second and third time they get the ball in this game. That's something that you have to look at from a purely coaching perspective, is when that team that you're playing gets that ball for the first time, even if they score, you want them to really run out what they've been practicing in terms of scripted plays, 10, 12, 15 play drives there. And yeah, that might wear down your guys a little bit, but you're fresh. That way you're not playing, second and third possessions where the other team's still, basically in their bag. They're right where they want to be in terms of play calling. So Maryland, maybe a little bit to knock them off schedule. I do agree, going back and watching the game for a second time, I really picked up on the fact that Maryland moving the ball a lot better. It's just really being able to finish drives, come ready, almost all the way locked into play from the first snap. That's something that I think Locks will adjust. He talked about maybe changing up the practice cadence a little bit, changing
Yeah.
certain things in their preparation and in their almost their play scripting and in how they're going to get their guys ready to go for that first snap of the game. And as long as you can tweak that, I think this team overall, complete game performance wise, has really looked good. Now they haven't put up 50s yet like they were a couple years ago, but it's there. You know, the 4 turnovers and the unanswered points.
I think that's fair, but I do think that think it's natural for when we think about a slow start, we think of offense. But I think one last point I want to make on that is defensively. This is the second straight week that we've seen just a complete breakdown on that last level on the one of the first passing plays. I mean, for Charlotte, it was the first passing play, and for UVA, it was I think the one of the first plays for them to set them right up in Maryland territory. Actually, was the first play on the flea flicker.
Yep.
Then 2 plays later, they were able to run it in for a touchdown. So those first 2 touchdowns for Virginia came 128 yards on 10 plays, and barely 5 minutes, or about 5 minutes, 5.5 minutes there in time of possession. So I think that is obviously a concern there. But like you said, just kind of being able to make those adjustments the third quarter, being able to kind of take that away. Donnell Brown, like you said, the takeaways, obviously him being able to come down with what looked like a near identical interception from a week ago. And then Tarheeb still obviously being able to really help Maryland proclaim the momentum there in the fourth quarter with that interception on the third play of the quarter.
Yeah, I will say, going back and watching the two flea flicker plays, because I went back to the Charlotte game that I had recorded and looked at that situation as well. Both of them are, Bo Braid and Dante Trader are big time players for Maryland. They want to make their impact on the game felt early. Clearly, this time it was Dante Trader biting the run so hard. I mean, he steps in about 5 yards pre-snap before the play, like he had a read on it exactly, then comes all the way in, gets within 6 yards of the line of scrimmage, then turns around and realizes it's a passing play, and he's running back to recover it. Same thing happens last week with Maryland. Both times also Jaquan Shepard trying to step up as the guy is actually in coverage and make a play on the run. Look, you hear, if you go back and you listen to the broadcast, Devin Gardner is pointing out, how aggressive B. Will's defense is with his secondary players getting involved in stopping the run, which, again, it takes and it gives too. And both of these times, I think you're seeing play action and flea flickers, those types of plays. Again, early, you just have to be locked into your area of the field and not necessarily trying to I want to make a huge hit, because they got a guy like Glenn Miller out there who's just going to make those big plays. They got guys who like to fly around the field and level guys. So if you're Dante Trader, if you're Bo Braid, you got to take that safety assignment to heart a little bit over this next week and just say, I don't need to bite on the run, especially early in the game when I don't want to give up that big play.
Yeah, and I think that's completely fair there. And I think another aspect when you talk about just kind of the defensive performance, again, defense really did a good job settling in, and something that for the second straight week, with Calandria obviously drawing that start there. You got a chance to kind of have that Maryland defense get tested against that running quarterback again, and he was able to do some things, kind of Maryland broke contain like on a couple of plays there. Calandria was able to make plays with his legs a little bit, but again, largely I thought this defense was kind of able to settle in a little bit. Isaac Bunyan went down pretty early in the game. I believe he ended up playing with 7 snaps there, but overall, Panache Gote, he had himself a good day as well. Came up with that sack as well. I believe it was in the third quarter there. But yeah, I think that the defense has been able to kind of show that they're capable of making these necessary defensive adjustments.
Yeah, I just kind of want to give props to him, and I know that Calandria really did cost Virginia the game, but I think that Locks kind of compared him to Talia after the game. I mean, I see that comparison. This kid, he probably doesn't belong out there yet as a true freshman, but he can definitely has the arm for it, has the legs to make a play, and I think will be a really solid college quarterback if he can keep on going. And you saw the flashes of that, and you saw him kind of get Maryland again, losing contain as a defense. That's the number one thing that I think that you need to work on if you're going to face running quarterbacks, you're going to face anybody that likes to get outside the pocket and make anything happen. That is, going to be key for them. And then obviously, Donnell Brown, Kellen Wyatt, Maryland was able to bring some pressure. I believe they actually got 3 or 4 sacks. I went back and counted them against the official box score, and I think Kellen Wyatt may need to be credited with one that they did not give him. I thought he had a really good game and a really just strong unit. But again, I called out the interior pressure needing to come in our pod earlier this week. Still, Tommy Incan-Bensote, Jordan Phillips, they were in the backfield, but they just cannot complete the plays. Maryland's interior defensive line has got to get stronger going forward.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think that part is definitely fair, and I think, yeah, I think secondary as well. I think you mentioned Kellen White. He made a couple plays, consecutive plays for Maryland's defense. Gavin Gibson, obviously, he was able to make his season debut, and he made a couple nice plays as well. But yeah, I think just kind of overall this defense, especially the defensive line, going into Big Ten play. They're going to need the depth. I think Drake Colbert, obviously, he was able to kind of make an impact there with his forced fumble in the fourth quarter. But yeah, just kind of overall, I just think that I think that's kind of part of the quiet optimism kind of around the room going into the season. Just having to replace all three starters, obviously Jordan Phillips, Tommy King, Tajay Johnson, all those guys were kind of dependable pieces for that unit. Jordan Phillips for the second time this season, he led the way with 48 snaps. Quayshawn Fuller finished with 41, and Christian Teague, he's another guy who walk on that he's been able to kind of make himself factor into the rotation over these last 2 years. So, but yeah, obviously just being able to kind of get that pressure on the quarterback and get that level contained. I think that's kind of just maybe the biggest emphasis for this defense going into the long week of prep against Michigan State.
Yeah, I definitely think so. And Ahmed, I'll ask you this question just with your inside look on the program right now. In the secondary, Perry Fisher was out there playing meaningful snaps. I know Whitaker's out there. Obviously, Gavin Gibson's back. I think he'll ultimately take that spot. Glenn Miller was rotating between safety and corner. Who's kind of going to be that third guy there with or Jaquan Shepard and Tarheeb Still? Who's really going to end up being that nickel back for Maryland?
Yeah, I mean, you've seen actually a lot more of Corey Coley, playing on the outside as well. And like you mentioned, Perry Fisher. I think this is really his first time where he got a chance to see a lot more opportunities. Got to finish with 22 snaps. Lionel Whitaker with 20 snaps. Gavin Gibson with finish with 22 as well. But I think kind of Corey Coley could be that guy. And then, Loxy talked about moving Tarheeb still a little bit to nickel a little bit more. So I think obviously, like you said, just kind of being able to rotate a lot of these guys. But I think Gavin Gibson also getting back on the field, I think that kind of gives Maryland a dependable option. And, this is, like I said, this was his season debut. So wouldn't be shocked if he kind of, finds his way on the field in those, three wide receiver sets. So I think that the unit has kind of shown that they have a couple options they can turn to, but we'll say Tarheeb Still and Jaquan Shepard. I thought both of those guys. Tarheeb Still, I think obviously he was able to rebound with this pair of interceptions in the fourth quarter, but also allowed 5 receptions on 12 targets for 48 yards in the day. So I think there's some room to work with at the starting too as well.
Yeah, we definitely agree with that. Let's flip it over to the offensive side of the ball. Let's talk quarterback first in offensive tempo. I thought the tempo for the Terps was improved. Obviously, Jay Sean Jones post game, Mike Loxley post game. I'm pretty sure Leah was probably thinking it himself. Just still that little bit off schedule as a unit.
Yeah, I think Deshaun Jones, he kind of talked about it as well. I think there was one play where I believe it was Deshaun Jones who got the ball, but he had, I believe it might have been Corey Dyches, Robin Hemby. Don't quote me on
It
that,
was
but he had
Hemby.
a second
Yeah,
option. Who was it?
Hemby, I believe.
It was Hemby, yeah. He might have had a touchdown on that play, but yeah, I think there were a couple of deep balls. I think that one with Ty that landed in the end zone that was just a little bit off. I think maybe Talia would have had a chance to connect with him if he gotten the ball out of his hand a little bit sooner. So I do think that there's a little bit of still trying to refine that the chemistry there. So yeah, it just kind of feels like a little bit off, but obviously you just kind of being able to capitalize on those explosive plays like you talked about.
Yeah, I think in terms of overall tempo, the team definitely looks improved week over week. I thought Leah did a little bit of a better job of taking some of those soft zone 7 yard hitch routes across the middle of the field. Obviously, not necessarily taking a chance on that rollout play, and he hits Jay Sean, who still picks up yardage. I mean, it's not like we're throwing the ball away when there's wide open guys. They're still throwing the deep ball after the defense realizes that a guy's broken open. So I think when you look at the film as a whole, Leah looks a lot more comfortable back there. And if he's going to take those 10-yard plays, even when he throws some shots, I think if you look at him year over year, really he is a 30 or 40 yard in quarterback. He likes those short hitch routes. He likes the tempo of the offense to hit, chunk plays, but they're not 40-yard deep balls. And yeah, Maryland's going to take their shots. They got big time wide receivers. They need to do that to have the defense be aware of that. But however, they just really have not been able to connect on them with him at quarterback. And I like the focus kind of shifting there. Now, a
Yeah.
couple plays that I'll point out in terms of that is, obviously you mentioned the Ty Felton deep ball.
Mhm.
I think they had one or two shots where Prather was kind of broken open. They're running him deep, and he's looking kind of out to him at first and then back in. And then the guy that I really think will help the whole thing come together and is worth mentioning is when Tyrese Chambers finally gets fully healthy. He's definitely a wide receiver that can kind of play that slot position along with Jay Sean, along with Prather, and be a big threat for them over the middle. And then you're going to have a position where you can put Dyches out there and Jones, Prather, and Chambers, and really have four big time players out there. And then you really get to see, okay, Felton's going to come in, we're going to run a go route, and the rotation will start to really gel together. And then as a quarterback, I think he'll feel more comfortable. And as a play caller, being Josh Gaddis and Kevin Sumlin and Locks working together on that, I think they'll really know exactly when to put in, dial up those shots and maybe complete some of them and let Leah know, just let it rip on this play. You got what you're looking for.
Yeah, I think that's definitely completely fair, and I think it's pretty interesting. Ty Felton for the third consecutive week ended up being the guy who led the wide receivers with 44 snaps on Friday night. But yeah, like you said, you're just kind of being able to kind of get that. I do think that there are a couple things about Talia that he did that kind of impressed me as well. I thought he did a pretty good job just kind of picking up the pressure from Virginia, kind of adjusting, making plays on the run. And, when he was under pressure on Friday night, finished 6 of 8 for 130 yards compared to 14 of 23 for 212 yards when, in a clean pocket. But yeah, just, I think just kind of being able to kind of balance on off those wide receivers a little bit. I think that they've kind of been able to give Ty Felton those opportunities, and I think that's just kind of all about timing. I think Ty Felton, he's another guy. This is also just a byproduct of maybe someone who got a chance to maybe get his feet wet a little bit 2 years ago in the latter half of the season. Got glimpses last year, and I think this is really his first full season. So yeah, I think it's kind of fair for him to kind of be working on that a little bit. But yeah, like you said, Tyrese Chambers, obviously he missed last week's game with what I heard was an ankle injury. And then Caden Prather, I think he's kind of shown those flashes as well. Obviously did a little bit more than just be that red zone threat yesterday. Ended up notching a career long 43-yard catch and run. I should add. So definitely feels like there is that extra layer though, especially with the tight ends. You kind of seen Corey Dyches. Obviously, he finished with 4 catches for 56 yards statistically, but just didn't feel like he kind of had that same impact week 2, week 3 that he had in the week 1 win against Towson. So it'll be kind of interesting to see how the passing game kind of grows from week 3 till week 6.
Yeah, and I think that's what we're going to take a look at right now. 3 game snapshot for the Terps as of this point. They made it to the 3-0 point, which was expected by everybody that really knew this team. I'll start off with what I think Maryland needs to do better with, and we'll talk about the good. And I really think it is making sure they re-involve players that have had big games back into the offense, getting guys back into the loop. I think Corey Dyches, he had that huge game in the home win over Michigan State last year. And then kind of, there's CJ Dupree had some big moments. Other guys got in it, but Mike Loxley and this offensive staff needs to go back and say, okay, if the defense is going to focus on Caden Prather this week, we've got a guy like Ty Felton that can make a big play. We have Octavian Smith, who we haven't really seen yet. We have all these playmakers on the field, and we don't really have an offense that every guy's going to get, we're going to have Jay Sean Jones is going to get 100 yards for us this week. It's a rotational offense where they're looking for the weaknesses in the defense and who they're focusing on. But I think finding ways to get guys 7 to 10 targets that you're big time players needs to be the goal for the offense going forward.
Yeah, I think that's definitely fair. I think just something that I think Maryland kind of needs to do better. I would say it's kind of on the other side of the ball would be kind of defense at best, the secondary a little bit. I think the last 2 weeks have kind of shown a little bit of flashes, and I think especially more so against Virginia than it was against Charlotte there. But just think kind of locking down the Tarheeb still and Jaquan Shepard. I thought Jaquan Shepard kind of had some iffy moments there. He had a missed tackle along the sideline that ended up being a catch and run for Virginia into Maryland territory yesterday. So I think that's kind of maybe the biggest concern for me there.
Yeah, and just one more point on that side is I think the play calling should be a little bit maybe more creative to get Dante Trader, Glenn Miller, Bo Braid getting downhill in pass rush situations. We talked about them, or I talked about them a little bit earlier, getting kind of sucked into those run situations. If those guys want to fly around the field and hit, hard and get after the quarterback and make those big plays, I think they should really get those opportunities to do them by design, not necessarily stepping into the box, but maybe kind of floating around. And if they need to really get pressure on the quarterback, which they've I guess, had better games with. I think the Virginia game was probably one of their better ones as of recent as far as getting to the quarterback. Those guys should have those opportunities. On the good side, I think Jay Sean Jones. I think that he's going to be the guy that I have to look at right now and just say, it's been around the program a long time this year, kind of getting that chance to be a focal point of the offense, and I think he's delivering on his role of being that kind of almost like 1 yard to 25-yard wide receiver for Maryland, getting out, being that security blanket guy who they know they can go to and rely on. I think that he has been a huge bright spot for this team in the first 3 games, and hopefully continues to have that big last year in College Park.
Yeah, I think obviously, Deshaun, he was kind of able to, mention, just kind of through the offseason, a couple transfers, a lot of young guys coming in, just kind of being able to be that leader, that veteran in the room. And obviously he was able to break off with that 64-yard touchdown that we mentioned that helped give Maryland that lead that they never relinquished there. So I think that's a good call there. And I think, on the other side, maybe it feels a little bit more generic. I just kind of feel like the linebacker room has kind of just been overall just kind of proven that they've been that strength of the defense. I just kind of think obviously with Jay-Sean Barham, who's probably the most talented guy, but, the guy we haven't really seen the most this year, Ruben Hippolyte, Benaje Gote, Jeremy Spraggins, we've seen a lot this year. Then later in the games, got a chance to see Daniel Wingate a couple times. Caleb Wheatland, obviously, he's been able to make an impact as well. So I just think that this, especially when you talk about the interior defensive line needing to generate that pressure, that inside linebacker room kind of being able to, generate that as well. And then that includes Kellen Wyatt, who's on the edge now, outside linebacker a little bit, just being able to kind of make that factor. And like we talked about, just making key plays in last night's game as well as in the game against Charlotte. So I think that's kind of been the biggest thing for me. And I think if Maryland is going to, continue that success in the Big Ten play, that front seven led by those linebackers needs to kind of be where they're at. And defensive line is kind of where we need to see that maybe that next step. But I think the linebacker room's doing a really solid job right now.
So we'll do more of a look ahead going into Big Ten play on our Tuesday podcast. We'll preview the Michigan State game. Obviously, a lot of changes in a tough situation up there in East Lansing. They'll take on a top 10 team in Washington up in East Lansing today, and really will be a very, very strange game, I'm sure, for a lot of Michigan State fans and players. Mark D'Antonio joining the staff again. He'll be back on the sideline starting today. So it will be definitely a bit of a strange matchup, 3:30 next week on NBC for the Terps as they head up to East Lansing. Ahmed, I'll ask you one more in a 3-game snapshot. On a scale of 0 to 10, 10 being they met your expectations, as for 0 being I have no idea what I'm looking at right now, where do you kind of rate this Maryland football team?
Yeah, I would say probably 7 or 8. Think the passing attack, I think it's just natural, to kind of have those kinks ironed out. I think the defense, the slow starts have kind of been a concern, but I think, maybe it kind of mirrors what we saw last year with the 2022 defense, in terms of just the first and second half adjustments. So I think it's, obviously, Loxley talked about it and don't have the exact quote, but essentially he's seen enough that he doesn't need to know that we have the resiliency to overcome the early adversity, essentially. So I just think kind of Maryland being able to kind of figure out a way to avoid these early holes, I think is obviously the big thing, but Maryland's being able to make those adjustments, obviously. But I think just kind of the running game, been a little bit inconsistent, just kind of inconsistent, and then last night some of the last 2 weeks you can probably make an argument that he deserves a little bit more snaps in that showed some flashes, but kind of will they be able to take that next step? We'll be able to see next week. So I think the offensive line just kind of being a little bit still a work in progress there. Obviously, got Ruby as the maybe able to play yesterday, being able to play ball or whatnot. So just being able to once that's kind of ironed out, whether it is the tackle, whether it's the guard, that remains to be seen. But the overall protection, I think that the line has probably been better from week 1 that kind of matches up with my expectations. I think a lot of fans are kind of seeing, going to that first week, want to see a lot of players. And these last So just kind of being able to iron this out going into Big Ten play, I think that's kind of par for the course there. So about 7 or 8, I think like I said, just the passing game, kind of being able to get that rapport down, like you mentioned. I think that's kind of the big thing, and then defensively figuring out how to avoid these slow starts.
Yeah, for me, I give it pretty much a solid 6. Kind of leaning towards 7, but 6 is probably more accurate, just in terms of a lot of what you said. Mainly the passing attack. Not, I don't really think had a great 2 weeks. Obviously, Leah just seemed off last week. This week, definitely a step forward. I will sort of adjust my expectations, because I think as far as the coaching staff goes, they've adjusted their expectations a little bit on what they want to accomplish in these first 3 weeks, kind of knowing really that they should be 3-0 at this point. They're where they're at in terms of win-loss record, which is what counts in the end. Is Locks really wanted to get a lot of guys out there. He wanted to take a minute to gel. They probably haven't put everything on tape yet. I feel like that first year where they had those two, huge 79-point performances over 70, just trying to run it up on everybody. I think that may have kind of calmed down inside the room. Now it's like, can we get our young guys playing? Can we find a way to kind of gel our team to be a better performing team come next week? Now, when you do those things, you really do have to deliver. You have to win those games, because you're not putting up those big numbers. You're not on Sports Center saying you're the highest scoring offense, in America, and then dominating in that case, a ranked Syracuse team the next week, putting 63 on them. You're not getting those huge numbers and those national accolades with everyone staring at you. So for Maryland, I really feel like, the Big Ten season, as Locks always says, now we're really, really, he really says now the season starts pretty much every year. From this point, I could not agree more with it being this year, just how untested this team is at this point. Next week's going to be, a game to circle. And then I think the week after, that Indiana game really becomes, kind of that pivotal point. Can they get to, at hope, 5-0, but if not 4-1, can they continue to win these games and beat the teams they should by substantial margins, even if they are slow starts? They may just have a team that gets down 7 or 10 or 14 before they really wake up. They just need to make sure that doesn't turn into 21-28, and suddenly you look up the scoreboard and you lose the game 63-17, but you had a great fourth quarter. That doesn't count for anything. That's not what anybody wants to see. So as far as 3 games go, I almost feel like, and feel free to disagree with me if you do, you really don't know much about this team yet. They haven't really played like that game where you're like, that's what this team's supposed to look like, or that's really what you didn't want to see.
Yeah, I think that's fair. But how many teams that haven't had like, other than like a Texas, Alabama, how many teams have really shown it, laid it all out there through the first 3 weeks of the season? So I think that's part of it, especially just kind of getting through, like you said, expect to get to 3-0 here, and just in terms of roster and substitutions and being able to play guys, things like that. I think being able to show some flashes and obviously get some of these guys' feet wet a little bit. I think that's kind of been the main thing so far. So I think that's valid there. But yeah, Maryland definitely has not had that, like, complete performance. I mean, if you want to say Towson, that's fine, but did that not sure that moved the needle for anyone there. I think that was, again, like we said, just about a lot of these guys getting their feet wet for the first time. So yeah, so I think it's justified there.
Yeah, I would agree on that. And with that, I think we'll leave it for Tuesday. We're going to have a snapshot of the rest of at least the next 3 games. I think we're going to talk about definitely the Michigan State game, talk about where the Big Ten sits as of right now as the Terps enter Big Ten play. As always, if you like this show, give us a thumbs up. Subscribe to the pod everywhere you can. Give us a review. It really helps us out across the board and get more people listening and watching the pod here. For Ahmed Gafir, I'm Mason Viner. As always, thanks for watching and thanks for listening.